another funny thing that happened to us with our own little vigilante group that the men, and the men really did this, and they had the blessing of the sheriff who helped them. They patrolled the roads at night looking for anybody who might be someone that they thought would be out to do them in. A lot of homes were robbed. Clothes would be taken. Food would be taken. They loved to take peanut butter, whatever. You know, people were just really hungry and they had no clothing. So they took what was there. And this particular night, Jim Christian happened to be spending the night with us. So he and Terrell got in our car, and Forrest Dozier, who lived down on the corner from us, about a mile away, the son-in-law, got in his car and came up here. We turned off our lights. They did. The two cars, one behind the other. Well, nobody knew that Forrest was going to turn in when he got to Jones Christian's place about 2 miles east. He turned in. Jim and Terrell hit his car from the rear, crashed both cars, broke Jim's ribs. His gun was sticking in his belt, and when the car crashed, it broke a rib and bunged him up pretty badly. And of course, Jim was a proud man. He didn't want to go to town to the post office the next day, limping along and have to tell his story. So I think he stayed in for several days and did not allow any of the town men to know what had happened to him. It did sound pretty ridiculous. But those were the things we did to try to protect our homes. I don't know what they'd ever have done if they'd caught anybody, but that's the way life went, and it went like that in every community in the Panhandle at that time. When I came, the school was operating at full strength, and about every half mile there would be a house in this neighborhood. There were 2 teachers at the rural school. They carried on a very fine program, usually a married couple. They had a little teacherage for them to live in, a little 3-room house that sat right by the school, and a tennis court and a basketball court. And they had around 60 children, I imagine, because they didn't consider a room full till it had 30 in those days. Anyway, they did have. Now, there were no school buses. The children all rode their horses to school, or had, I don't think there was a car that they drove. I'm sure there was not, but they all either walked and brought their lunches. They all brought their lunches, and they got there by horseback. Of course, we didn't have children then, and by the time our children got ready for school, they had annexed all of these little rural schools to the Claude School, and drove school buses. Now, the first school buses were just individually owned, and a man would take a nice big truck and build seats on the side and put a little top on it and wait for the children to get back there, and that's what the children rode into Claude. I'm sure there were no cushions in those seats, and I'm sure they really did not feel that they were very luxurious, but the bus drivers were wonderful and took such good care of the children, because sometimes they'd be caught out in bad weather and have to spend the night. I remember one of the worst nights I ever spent was when Carolyn in the 2nd grade was with the bus when it spent the night at a rural home in the country, and Jack Wilson was the driver. He and Mr. Robinson, in whose home they were going to spend the night, managed to get the children out by taking quilts from Ms. Robinson's home. Jack had gone down and got the quilts from Mr. Robinson. They held them up so the children could walk along, and the quilts would knock that was a blizzard when the snow was just blowing so hard they could hardly stand up. And that bus was loaded. Now I see the bus go by with no children at all in it, and it's miles before they pick up a child. But that's the difference in these little houses where families lived and farmed and made their living. They're all gone. With the coming of the war, some of them moved to California. The women took jobs, and the men went to war. And that posed a new thing for us. Tom was about 10 or just about 11 when the war broke out, World War II. And our hired men, the boys that had always helped us, were all gone to war. And it was something to work cattle without them, because cattle working had always required a lot of help. On this place with the canyon to gather the cattle in, you had to have, and for years that was just the greatest thing for us. These same good friends that were in the cattle business traded out work, and they would come and help us, and they knew our canyon as well as we did, or as well as Terrell did, and they would help him do that, and we get them all out on top and brand them, and that is a real talent to be able to handle stock in this canyon. We did the best we could. I would help, Tom would help, and we'd brand a few at a time. None of those great big brandings like we'd been used to when the women cooked all day and the men worked all day. That was gone. We wrote lots of letters. I did. That was one thing I could do, to the boys that had worked for us, and kept up with them in the service. And we used our place for the gathering spot when the community was required to sign up for sugar rationing, for shoe rationing, for coffee rationing. It was just so simple to ask them to come here, and they would turn out school on those days. So we'd usually invite Tom's teacher and Carolyn's teacher to come and help. The teachers were expected to help sign up people for the rationing. And they'd come out and spend the day. I'd cook a special dinner, and we'd just make a good thing out of it, and get the people all signed up for the ration cards, you know. And had it not been for the Wilson family, who had several grown children, none of whom drank coffee, we would never have had enough coffee coupons. They gave us their coffee coupons. And then we were lucky, too, ranchers were, because most of them had their boots made, and they didn't have to use a shoe coupon for that. So we could stay in shoes, and we got enough sugar to last us, because there were 4 of us, you know. We didn't feel the privation too much, but we raised a lot of hogs in those days, and we had a lot of pork to eat.